Good afternoon, girls. Today we're going to talk about the cases of Victor and Isabel. For that, I prepared some questions for both cases, and you will have to answer accordingly. Let's go. Okay, for Shirley, in the case of Victor, what factors might have limited Victor's ability to acquire language despite Itar's intensive training?
Okay, for me, the victors pronounce insulation during the critical period for language development likely caused permanent neurological limitations, and his brain had already adapted to survival in the wild rather than linguistic communication. And additionally, he struggled to dissociate new speech sounds from the animal-like sounds he had previously used creating cognitive interfacing that hindering his ability to learn conventional language despite its intensive training.
Okay, the same question for Mayerly. What factors might have limited Victor's ability to acquire language despite ITAR's intensive training?
Yeah, the same as Shirley said, Victor language development was limited because he had spent many years in the wild, and he found after the critical period of language learning, and his early isolation affected his social, emotional, and cognitive development.
Okay, good. Joanna, how did Victor's early isolation in the wild influence his social and emotional development?
Okay. For me, Victor's early isolation seriously damaged his social and emotional development. He was not used to human contact, so he had trouble trusting people and forming normal relationships. Emotional, he seemed distant and showed very limited reactions, almost more like an animal than a child who grew up in a family.
Okay, for Karen, the same question. How did Victor's early isolation in the wild influence his social and emotional development?
Okay, I think about I believe he adopted animal behaviors and had difficulty understanding human norms and emotions and functioning more on instinct.
Okay, uh, for Shirley, what can we learn from ITAR's teaching methods in relation to modern approaches to language rehabilitation?
Okay, for me, ITER demonstrates the importance of individualization, adaptive instruction. When speech production failed, he pivoted to reading and writing and showing flexibility in approach. And his use of games, activities, and multisensory strategy to build awareness parallels modern rehabilitation techniques that emphasize engagements and contextual learning and adjust goals based on the patient's strengths rather than persistent with unsuccessful methods.
Okay, the same question for Mayerly. What can we learn from ITAR's teaching methods in relation to modern approaches to language rehabilitation?
For me, Ether's method teaches patience, consistency, and individual training because are essential. These principles that are still used in modern language rehabilitation. And he combined emotional connection, sensory training, and structured language exercise, which is similar to today's use of positive reinforcement and personalized therapy plans. And his work also shows that if intervention starts too late, even strong teacher methods have some limits.
Okay, for Joanna, why do you think Victor was more successful in recognizing sounds that in producing speech?
I think Victor was better at recognizing sounds because understanding is usually easier than produce language. His brain could learning to distinguish speech sounds from other noises, but his muscles habits were not training for speaking. Also, years of using only animal-like sounds might it difficult for him to recognize his system to produce clear words.
Okay, for Karen, the same question. Why do you think Victor was more successful in recognizing sounds than in producing speech?
Why short commands resembled the signals he knew from living. With dogs, complex language requires cognitive structures that he did not develop.
Okay, and now in the case of Isabel, for Shirley, uh, what elements in Isabel's environment allowed her to recover language more successfully than Ginny or Victor?
Okay, and the Isabel was rescued at age 6.5 and still within the critical period for language acquisitions. Unlike Jenny or Victor, she had some form of communication systems through rudimentary sync language with her mother and provide a foundation for symbolic communications. And additionally, she received immediately systematic intervention at the Children's Hospital Speech Clinic under Mason's guidance, and her confinement will severely still involve human interaction with her mother.
Okay, and now the same question for Mayerly. What elements in Isabel's environment allow her to recover language more successfully than Jenny or Victor?
Yes, I think that there is two important elements. The first one is that Isabel was still very young, and the second one that she had constant emotional contact with her mother. Even though her mother was mute, this bond gave her some early form of communication and security. And also, once she was discovered, she received immediate and intensive language support during the critical period. And this factor helped her progress much faster than Ginny or Victor.
Okay, for Joanna, how did Isabel's relationship with her mute mother influence her early communication attempts?
Um, Isabel relationships with her mute mother gave her basic form of communication, even if it was not a spoken language. Through gestures and simple signs, she learned that uh, sounds and movements could be used to express needs and emotions.
Okay, the same question for Karen.
Although her mother did not speak, there was communicative in between the gestures, joint attention, and emotional contact. That bond gave her a minimal basis for understanding that communication serves to interact.
Okay, for Shirley, what does Isabel process tell us about the resilience of the human brain before puberty?
Okay, for me, the Isabel's remaker recovery progresses from not speech to producing sentences, commands, and retelling stories within just 3 months. This demonstrates the brain's extraordinary plasticity during childhood, and her success shows that when interventions occurs before puberty, and within the critical period, children can rapidly acquire language even after severe deprivations and highlight the brain's capacity for compensatory development when given appropriate stimulation.
Okay, the same question from Mayerly. What does Isabel's progress tell us about the resilience of the human brain before puberty?
I think that Isabel progress shows that the human brain before puberty is highly flexible and resilient. Even after years of isolation, she was still within the critical period for language development, which allowed her to learn quickly once she received some support. And this suggests that early intervention can help the brain to adapt, recover, and develop language much faster than expected.
Perfect. Um, for Joanna, how could Mason's approach to language teaching be compared to Eater's or Sullivan's?
Mason's approach was similar to Itter's and Sullivan's because all three use intensive individualized training focus on real communication, like Itter with Victor and Sullivan with uh, Helen. Mason combine patience and repetitions and meaningful activities to make language useful for Isabel's daily life. However, Mason's work was more successful because Isabel was still young and had some previous communicate experience with her mother.
Okay, and Karen, how could Mason's approach to language teaching be compared to Eater's or Sullivan's?
I think it was similar because he also used constant interaction, positive reinforcement, and meaningful communication. All of them worked with patience, structure, and practical activities to stimulate language and comprehension.
Okay, and the end, I was a conclusion. Um, the case of Isabel and Victor showed that language development depends both on the environment and on the timing of intervention. Isabel, who had some basic human communication and received help before puberty, made rapid progress that thanks to her brain's plasticity. In contrast, Victor, isolated during his critical years, was unable to develop functional language despite intensive instructions. These cases demonstrate that early social intervention and timely educational support are essential for successful language acquisition. Thanks for you participating.